80 pounds of shadow and fury hit the man square in the chest. You don't hear a sound like that often. It's the sound of justice arriving faster than a bullet, a blur of motion in the dim porch light. 1 second, the thug was a predator, laughing in the dark, ready to break a home. The next, he was on his back, the night air forced from his lungs by a K9 that was more spirit than animal. He never even saw the deputy move in. He just knew. He'd lost. Out here, the nights are long, and the roads are dark. It's easy to think you're alone. It's easy for evil to think it's hidden. But the prairie wind carries whispers, and it always knows who's watching. It knows there's a courage that doesn't sleep, an honor that still wears a badge. This isn't just a story about a bad night in Texas. It's a story about the line, the one that protects a family, the one that good men hold. We're all neighbors under the same big sky. It's good to know who you're sharing the fire with. Let me know what town or country you're watching from tonight. We're glad to have you. Now, stay right here till the end. Some stories deserve to be seen through, especially the ones that remind us what courage really looks like, and prove that no one who stands for what's right ever truly stands alone. There's a quiet out here in the Texas Hill Country, a stillness that sinks right into your bones. It's the kind of peace people move for, the kind that promises safety. But you and I know that peace is a fragile thing. It's a thin layer of ice over deep, cold water. For this widow, living out on that isolated stretch of land, the quiet wasn't just peace, it was her whole life. It was the sound of her healing, the sound of her remembering the family she'd built in that house. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange, the way it only does out west. That's when the real quiet is supposed to settle in, the cricket and wind quiet. Instead, she heard gravel crunch. It's a sound that doesn't belong when you're not expecting anyone. It's the sound of the outside world breaking a promise. She looked through the screen door, her heart catching in her throat, seeing 2 shapes moving near the fence line, just beyond the weak glow of her porch light. These weren't lost travelers. You can tell. You learn to read the shadows out here. They moved with a predatory slouch, the kind that spits on honor and respects nothing. They saw the single truck in the driveway, the darkened windows, the vulnerability. They saw a target, not a home. They didn't know that courage isn't just about fighting. Sometimes it's about enduring. And they didn't know that the heart of this family, though grieving, was still beating strong within those walls. They started toward the porch, slow, confident, enjoying the fear they assumed was growing inside. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was clear. If you believe in stories of real courage, the kind that doesn't roar but holds the line, then you're in the right place. We walk this road together. If these stories of justice and faith touch your heart, I'm asking you to join us. Subscribe to the channel and walk this path with us for a while. She dialed 911. Her voice was steady but quiet. "I have intruders," she whispered. "They're on my porch." The dispatcher's voice on the other end was professional, calm, but the widow could hear the distance in it. Miles of empty road, miles of darkness. That's the thing about isolation. It's your best friend right up until the moment it becomes your worst enemy. She was alone out there, a single light against a whole lot of black. The men heard her. A muffled voice through the door. One of them laughed, a short, ugly sound that cut the night air. He kicked the bottom step. Not hard enough to break it, just hard enough to make a point. They weren't in a hurry. They figured they had all the time in the world. They figured wrong. They didn't understand that true justice has a way of showing up, even when the roads are dark and the hour is late. Inside, she backed away from the door, moving toward the kitchen. She wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking about her late husband. She was thinking about the honor he'd lived by, the promise he'd made to protect this home, this family. Now, it was her turn. She was scared, sure. Only a fool wouldn't be. But fear and courage often hold hands. Her fear didn't paralyze her. It focused her. The porch light flickered. Maybe it was a moth. Maybe it was the old wiring. But in that moment, it felt like the world was dimming. The men were shadows, silhouettes against the dying light of the prairie. They represented chaos, the kind that wants to tear down what good people spend a lifetime building. They were the wolves at the door, testing the locks, testing the resolve of the person inside. You've felt that, haven't you? That moment when the air gets cold and you know something is wrong. It's a primal instinct. It's the feeling of safety being threatened. It's the moment you realize that family isn't just who you love. It's what you'll fight for. The widow wasn't a fighter, not in the way these thugs were, but she had a resilience they couldn't possibly understand. The dispatcher was still on the line. A small voice promising help was coming. "They're on the way, ma'am. Just stay hidden." But "on the way" felt like a lifetime. Out here, on the way, could be 20 minutes. 20 minutes is an eternity when evil is breathing on your doorstep, testing the handle, wondering just how easy it's going to be to shatter your world. The taller one stepped right up to the screen door, his face obscured by the shadow of his hat. He didn't knock. He just pushed. The latch held for now. It was a test, a prelude. He was seeing how much courage was left inside that house. He underestimated her. He underestimated the deep roots of honor that held that home together, stronger than any deadbolt. She held her breath, praying a silent prayer, not just for herself, but for the memory of the family that filled that house. She was praying for justice, but mostly she was praying for time. The sound of that handle turning, clicking against the lock, was the loudest sound in the world. And out on the highway, miles away, the sound of an engine pushing hard against the night was the only answer. The call crackled over the radio, sharp and urgent, cutting through the low static of a long shift. Domestic disturbance evolving. Possible 1031. Priority. But the dispatcher's voice, a voice Deputy Sheriff Callan knew like his own, had an edge to it. He didn't need the codes. He heard the real meaning. A good person is in bad trouble. This wasn't a bar fight. This was different. This was the kind of call that makes the air in the cab feel thin. He grabbed the mic, his voice calm. Show 1097. He was en route. Beside him, in the passenger seat, Aries lifted his head. The K9 wasn't just a partner. He was a seasoned officer. He knew the sound of that specific tension in Callan's voice. It wasn't the bored sigh of a false alarm. It was the quiet intake of breath that meant the work was real. The dog let out a low, almost silent whine, a vibration of readiness. He'd seen more trouble than most men, and he had an honor all his own, a duty he understood without words. Callan pushed the cruiser, the engine rumbling in protest as it ate up the dark farm road. He knew this stretch. He knew how far out that widow's place was. Too far. Backup was a comforting thought, but out here, backup was usually just you, your training, and whoever you brought with you. Tonight, it was him and the dog. He thought of his own family, safe at home, and a cold resolve settled over him. He was the line. He was the one who stood between the wolves and the flock. This was the part of the job they don't talk about in the academy. The miles of darkness, the solitude, the weight of the badge when you're the only one coming. It's a heavy kind of courage, not the loud kind you see in movies, but the quiet, stubborn kind that keeps driving into the dark. He wasn't fueled by anger. He was fueled by a deep, unwavering sense of justice. He was the man who answered the call, the guardian who didn't back down. He pictured the scene. Remote, no neighbors for miles, unknown assailants, unknown weapons. It was a tactical nightmare. But you don't get to choose the calls. You just answer them. You rely on your wits, your partner, and maybe a little bit of faith that you're doing the right thing. Aries shifted beside him, his claws ticking on the hard plastic of the seat. He was ready. That dog was pure courage, a four-legged embodiment of the law. The dispatcher's voice came again. "Ma'am is whispering. She believes they're trying the back door." Callan's jaw tightened. They were escalating. They were testing the boundaries. He knew that type. The type that mistakes kindness for weakness, silence for absence. They didn't know who was coming. They didn't know that some men still live by a code, an old-fashioned honor that means you protect your people, period. He thought about the widow, alone. He'd seen her husband at the feed store. A good man, quiet, fair. He'd passed a few months back. Callan hadn't known him well, but he knew the type. The kind of man who makes a town stronger just by being in it. Now his family, what was left of it, was under attack. This wasn't just a call anymore. This was personal. This was about protecting the soul of the community. The gravel road was rough, rattling the truck, but Callan's hands were steady on the wheel. He'd been in storms before. He'd faced men with nothing to lose. His heart was steady, but it was beating hard. This wasn't about adrenaline. It was about focus. It was the calm of the man who knows his purpose. His purpose was justice, and justice was coming down this dirt road at 70 miles an hour. You learn, doing this work, that evil is lazy. It looks for the easy mark, the unlocked door, the isolated home. It counts on good people being too scared or too far away. But it forgets about the few who run toward the trouble. It forgets about the guardians. Ares, sensing the change in the road, the deceleration, stood up, his dark eyes fixed on the windshield, reading the night in a way no man could. The tires bit into the dirt as Callan slowed, cutting his approach short of the main driveway. He was still a quarter-mile out, hidden by a stand of mesquite and the pitch-black night. He couldn't just roll in, lights blazing. That would get someone hurt. This needed a different kind of approach. This needed silence. This needed the courage of the shadow, not the roar of the siren. He killed the engine, and the sudden quiet was deafening. Only the wind and the pounding in his own chest. He looked at Ares. The dog was a statue of coiled muscle, waiting for the command. This was where the training took over, where instinct and honor met. They were a team, a single unit bound by duty. They were the thin line, and they were about to step over it. He put his hand on the dog's ruff, a silent communication. Steady. Wait. The dog understood. They weren't just going to stop a crime. They were going to restore the peace. They were going to deliver justice to that doorstep. And as he stepped out of the cruiser into the cold Texas air, he knew this night was far from over. You don't just walk up on a situation like this. You don't announce your arrival. When you're dealing with men who've already crossed the line, you use the one thing they don't have: patience. Callan clicked off the cruiser's dome light before he even opened the door. The darkness swallowed him whole. This is the part of the job that feels ancient. No sirens, no backup, just the man, the animal, and the mission. He moved away from the truck, melting into the deeper shadows by the fence line, the mesquite trees rattling like old bones in the wind. He unclipped Ares from the seat. The dog didn't bound out, he flowed out, low to the ground, a black shadow merging with the night. Callan gave a quiet hand signal. Wide. Ares understood. The dog wasn't just a weapon. He was a scout. He fanned out to the left, a silent guardian sweeping the perimeter, his senses tasting the air, reading the story of the last 10 minutes. Callan trusted that dog's instincts more than most men's eyes. It was a bond built on honor and shared risk. Callan moved parallel, his boots making no sound on the dusty earth. This is a different kind of courage. It's not about kicking doors. It's about owning the silence. It's about becoming the hunter, not the hunted. His body cam was running, a single red light, a silent witness to whatever was about to happen. All you could hear was his breathing, steady, measured, the sound of a man who has mastered his own fear. He was focused on the thin slice of light under the widow's front door. He could smell the dry grass, the faint, acrid scent of cheap tobacco smoke on the wind. They were still there. Ares confirmed it, stopping dead 50 yards ahead, a statue of focused intensity. The dog didn't bark, didn't growl. He just looked, signaling the threat. That's the discipline. That's the honor of a true partner. He was saving his voice for when it mattered most. Callan felt that cold certainty settle in. The confrontation was coming. It was no longer a question of if, but how. He bypassed the gravel driveway, sticking to the soft dirt where his steps were muffled. Every shadow was a potential threat, every gust of wind a distraction. But Callan was calm. He was thinking about the family inside, about the promise the badge represented. It wasn't just a piece of tin. It was a covenant. It meant you stood in the gap. You were the wall. He moved past an old water trough, his eyes straining to pierce the gloom of the porch. The men were talking, their voices low, arrogant. They thought the 911 call was a bluff, or that help was too far away. They were enjoying the power, the fear they were creating. They had no idea that justice was already in their backyard, breathing their air, listening to their plans. They didn't know that a man with true courage was watching them, waiting for the precise second to act. They were predators who had just become the prey. You learn out here that darkness is a tool. It's only scary if you let it be. For Callan, it was a cloak. It was his ally. He slipped behind an old oak tree, the bark rough against his vest. He could see them now. Two figures, one pacing by the steps, the other trying the window on the side. They were getting impatient. Their evil was getting sloppy. And that's when you have them, when their arrogance makes them blind. Ares had circled, coming up behind the outbuildings, placing himself between the house and the men's likely escape route. He'd done it without a sound, without a command. That's the bond. It's deeper than training. It's a shared understanding of the mission. Protect the innocent. Uphold the honor of the badge. Ensure the family is safe. It's a simple creed, but it costs a man everything to live it. Callan drew his weapon, the sound of the holster snap absorbed by the wind. He didn't want to use it. A K9 engagement is always better. It's control. It's non-lethal, but it is decisive. He wasn't here for vengeance. He was here for justice. He was here to restore the order they had shattered. He watched the man at the window pull something from his pocket. A tool. The time for waiting was over. His body cam captured the tension, the heavy, steady breathing, the tight grip on his weapon, the absolute stillness of the world before the strike. This is the moment that defines a man, not the parade, not the paycheck. This. The second before you step out of the shadow, knowing you might not step back in, but courage is doing it anyway because the family inside is counting on you. The lead thug, the one by the window, took a step toward the front door, ready to join his partner. He was moving from the relative dark into the weak pool of the porch light. He was exposing himself. Callan gave a single sharp whisper into his radio, a command that was meant only for the dog. Higher! Here. It was the trigger. It was the release. Ares heard it. He moved from the shadows like a freight train, a blur of black muscle and righteous fury. He was no longer a scout. He was a weapon. And the night was about to explode into chaos, all because two men forgot that you don't mess with a Texas widow, and you don't threaten a good man's community. The man on the porch never saw it coming. He was focused on the door, on the violation, his mind full of arrogance. He didn't hear the sound of paws on dry dirt. Ares didn't burst from the shadows. He was the shadow, given form and purpose. He struck the lead thug high on the shoulder, a solid 80-pound impact of pure, focused justice. It wasn't an attack. It was an interception. The sound was a sickening thud, a grunt of surprised air, and the clatter of a pry bar on the wooden porch. The man went down hard. The second thug, the one by the window, froze. His brain couldn't catch up. 1 second, they were in control. The next, a black phantom was on his partner, a low, terrifying growl rumbling through the night. This wasn't a stray dog. This was a trained professional, and he was all business. This is the courage of the K9, an unwavering commitment to the mission, an honor that doesn't know how to quit. Sheriff's office, get on the ground. On the ground now. Callan's voice boomed out of the darkness, the sound of undisputed authority. He moved in, weapon light flooding the porch, pinning the second man against the house. The man's hands shot up, his eyes wide with terror, fixed on the dog. He wanted no part of it. The first man, the one on the deck, was trying to move, but Ares held him, a heavy presence, his teeth bared, waiting for the next command. This is what justice looks like in the dark, on the edge of town. It's not always a courtroom. Sometimes it's a deputy and his partner, standing between the innocent and the wicked. It's the moment the predators realize they're outmatched, not by force, but by a greater will. If this gets to you the way it gets to me, comment justice down below, because this is the line we have to hold, the one that protects every family. The second thug dropped to his knees, hands laced behind his head. He was done. The fight was over before it began. He saw the K9. He saw the deputy emerging from the night, and he understood. He was dealing with a different kind of law. He was dealing with a man who wouldn't back down, who carried the honor of his entire community on his shoulders. He wasn't just arrested. He was stopped. Callan kept his focus on the man on the ground, the one Ares had pinned. "Call your dog off!" The man spat, his voice a mix of pain and fear. Callan's voice was cold steel. "Stop moving." My partner holds until you are no longer a threat. Aries didn't budge. He just watched, a silent sentinel, the very definition of loyalty. He was protecting his partner, he was protecting the home, he was protecting the memory of the family that lived there. This is the split-second advantage. It's the moment the entire situation pivots. The thugs came in thinking they held all the cards. They had isolation. They had fear. They had numbers. What they didn't count on was the courage of a single deputy and the relentless honor of his K9 partner. They didn't count on the fact that some men still believe in protecting others, no matter the cost. The first thug finally went still, his hands spread wide. All right, I'm done." Callan gave a short, sharp command. Aries released, but he didn't retreat. He stepped back 2 paces, sitting, his eyes never leaving the suspect. He was a coiled spring, ready to re-engage if the man so much as flinched. That's discipline. That's the guardian a family prays for when they call 911. The widow's door cracked open, just a sliver. Callan heard it. "Ma'am, stay inside," he commanded, his voice firm but reassuring. "It's the sheriff's office. You are safe. Do not come out." He had to secure the threat before he could tend to the victim. That's the code. Justice first, then comfort. He moved in, cuffing the first thug. The man's bravado completely gone, replaced by the pathetic whimper of a bully who just got hit back. He secured the second man, the one who'd surrendered by the window. The entire confrontation had lasted maybe 30 seconds. 30 seconds of decisive action that changed the course of the night. This is the difference. The difference between chaos and order. The difference between fear and safety. It all comes down to those who have the courage to wear the badge and the partners who stand with them. Aries stood watch over both men, pacing between them, a dark shepherd making sure the wolves stayed in line. He was the living embodiment of the line that cannot be crossed. He was the protector of the family, the enforcer of justice, the very picture of honor. The men were outmatched, and they knew it. They hadn't just been caught. They'd been defeated by a standard they didn't even know existed. Callan holstered his weapon, the adrenaline starting to fade, replaced by the heavy calm of the aftermath. He keyed his mic. "Dispatch, show 2 in custody." The night was still, but it was a different kind of stillness now. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of order restored. But the job wasn't over. The most important part was still waiting behind that locked door. With the suspect secured in the back of his cruiser, the silence of the prairie rushed back in. But it was different now. It was the sound of safety, the sound of a storm that had passed. Callan walked back to the porch, his footsteps heavy. He was no longer the enforcer, he was the guardian. He stood at the door, giving it a soft knock. "Ma'am, it's Deputy Callan. You're safe now. They're gone." He heard the deadbolt slide back, a sound of profound relief. The door opened, and the widow stood there, illuminated by the light from her hallway. She was trembling, her hands clasped together, but her eyes were strong. She had shown her own kind of courage tonight, the quiet kind, the kind that endures. She hadn't folded, she had held the line. She looked past him first, into the darkness, as if to make sure the threat was truly gone. She was protecting her home, her family, until the very last second. Aries, his work done, walked up onto the porch. He didn't approach her aggressively. He just came near and sat, his tail giving a single low thump against the wood. He seemed to understand. He'd been the warrior, and now he was the comforter. The widow looked down at the dog, this animal that had been a monster to her attackers, and saw only a protector. She slowly reached out a trembling hand and laid it on his head. He leaned into her touch, a silent contract of safety. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. She wasn't just thanking Callan. She was thanking the dog. She was thanking God. She was thanking whatever it was in the fabric of the world that sends help when you call. "I didn't know. She didn't need to finish." Callan understood. In her eyes he saw the deep, abiding respect for the honor he represented. He had kept the faith. "You did good, ma'am," Callan said, his voice gentle. "You did everything right." It was important she knew that. It was important she knew her own strength. This was her home. The family she'd built here was safe because she'd had the courage to make the call, to hold on. Justice had shown up, but she had been the one to light the beacon. She was a survivor, not a victim. He stepped inside, just to clear the house, to make sure no one else was hiding, to make sure every window was secure. Aries stayed by her side on the porch, a self-appointed sentinel. As Callan walked through the quiet rooms, filled with pictures of a life well lived, he felt the weight of it. This is what they fought for. Not the dirt, not the boundaries, but the home. The right for a family to live in peace, to sleep soundly. When he came back out, she looked calmer. The shaking had subsided. The color was returning to her face. She was a Texan, tough as prairie grass. She would bend, but she wouldn't break. "Will they come back?" she asked, the last bit of fear in her voice. "No, ma'am," Callan said with absolute certainty. "They won't be coming back. We'll see to that." And that was a promise. That was the sound of justice settling in for the long haul. She offered him coffee, a gesture of profound, small-town honor. It was her way of restoring normalcy, of being the host in her own home again. He politely declined. "I've got to process them, ma'am. But I'll have another unit sit on your road for the rest of the night, just so you can get some rest." It was a gesture, but it was one that mattered. It meant she wasn't alone. As he walked back to his cruiser, Aries fell in beside him, his job complete. The dog looked up at him, and Callan put a hand on his head. "Good work, partner." It was all that needed to be said. They were a team. They had upheld their end of the bargain. They had brought courage into a dark place and held the line. The bond between them was forged in moments just like this. Callan got in, the radio already buzzing with other calls, other lives intersecting with the law. He looked back at the house one last time. The porch light seemed brighter now. The widow stood in the doorway, Aries still sitting beside her, watching the cruiser. It was a picture of resilience, a portrait of a family's strength, even when it's down to one. He put the truck in gear and pulled away, the red taillights disappearing down the long, dark road. The night wasn't over, not by a long shot, but this one battle, this one stand for what was right, was won. The honor of the badge was intact, and justice was riding in the back seat. The peace of the prairie returned, but it was a stronger peace now. It was a peace that had been tested and had held. It's a reminder that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the arrival of help. It's knowing that, even in the deepest dark, a light can shine. And as the cruiser headed back toward the highway, you could almost feel the soul of that small town breathing a little easier. The sound of the cruiser fades, leaving just the wind. The porch light stays on, a small beacon in the wide-open dark. Out here, the night always comes, but it never gets the last word. That belongs to the quiet courage of those who stand the watch, and the silent honor of a partner who asks for nothing but gives his all. It's a peace that was bought and paid for, a peace that lets a family sleep. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? When the gravel crunches outside your own door, when the shadows get bold and test the lock, what kind of courage will you find inside? When the moment comes for you to be the one, will you stand for what's right? Will you be the wall that protects your home, even if you have to stand alone? This world is full of noise, but the truth is always quiet. If you believe this world still belongs to the brave and the good, if you believe that justice is still worth fighting for, then stay with us, subscribe, and walk this road alongside me. Light travels slow in a long, dark valley, but it always arrives, and when it does, every shadow trembles. May you never lose faith in the quiet strength of good people, and may you always find the honor to be one of them.